I used to dread the dark months of the year. In fact, I used to dread the darkness so much that on Midsummer's night, I always felt disappointed and let down that the next day would be a little shorter than the last. And although summer had just begun, we were already spiraling towards winter and darkness. My dread of darkness also included day fading into night. When I was a child, I remember often feeling sad, a bit melancholy, when dusk came on and darkness set in. Although you might think I would be a sun worshiper, I'm not, especially if that means always wanting to be in the sun or getting a tan. I do, however, love sunny, bright blue days. They lift my spirits no matter how I'm feeling. I used to dislike winter scenery. It seemed drab and dismal, stark. The leafless, deciduous trees looked sad to me, lifeless. Gradually, over the years, I began to see beauty in those stark trees. Now I think their bare limbs are actually beautiful. I enjoy being able to see the shape, the pattern, the structure of their limbs. One thing that has helped me enjoy the dark months is to be fully present, to fully experience each season as it comes along, to revel in what each season has to offer. Then when winter comes, I don't feel cheated. Some years ago, I came across a small wooden box in a shop. The engraved words touched my heart. May every sunrise hold more promise, and every sunset hold more peace. Now it rests on my dresser, where its words nudge me if I need it, but I rarely do anymore. I have a memory of an enjoyable fall evening that I shared with my beloved grandfather when I was 4. Dusk was coming on as we raked leaves together. Doing anything with Grandpa was always a pleasure. I could smell food cooking in the house where my family and I lived with my grandparents. I knew my grandmother and my mother were cooking something yummy from the smells, so I looked forward to going into our warm and cozy house when our job was done and eating supper with the family. Years later, I gradually figured out ways to make my own home warm and cozy. Fires in the fireplace, candles giving off a warm glow, yummy smells from supper cooking, and being with loved ones. I also realized that people, like other mammals, need, at least partially, to hibernate. Whenever possible, I try to slow down a bit in the winter, maybe not work as hard, or at least allow my evenings to be more restful with a good book or a movie, and maybe, just maybe, going to bed a bit earlier. Last year, I heard about a concept from Denmark that incorporates what I strive to create in the dark months. It's called hygge, and I apologize to any Scandinavian who is here and can pronounce that better than I. It's creating light in the middle of darkness with fire, candles, gathering with friends and family, taking time off, creating connections, and contentedness. What could be better than feeling warm, cozy, and content in the middle of the dark months?
We have 2 short readings today. The first is by Jan Richardson, who writes, "Go slow if you can, slower, more slowly still. Friendly dark or fearsome, this is no place to break your neck by rushing, by running, by crashing into what you cannot see. Then again, it is true, different darks have different tasks. And if you have arrived here unawares, if you have come in peril or in pain, this might be no place you should dawdle. I do not know what these shadows ask of you, or what they might hold that mean you good or ill. It is not for me to reckon whether you should linger or whether you should leave. But this is what I can ask for you, that in the darkness there be a blessing, that in the shadows there be a welcome, that in the night you be encompassed by the love that knows your name." and Creation in the Darkness, written by Reverend Kristen Harper. In the beginning, there was a darkness, a blackness that covered all, comprising the building blocks of creation, the nutrients and nurturing needed to birth the world. This dark womb pushed out the light that released the heavens and cradled planets and stars adorning the universe. It formed the darkened earth from which all life emerged and to which all life returns when our bodies take their final breath. It is the same darkness that shields us from an unrelenting sun, that calls animals to a safe hibernation, that protects the germination of seed and bulb. Darkness signals an end to the hectic chaos of our days and lulls us to sleep and revitalization that we can face the next challenge. There is peace in the darkness and mystery and the unknown. And if we can rest in its grace, ceasing fighting to control it, we just might see in it the face of God. One of the best things that has happened recently for my own sense of well-being is that my best friend Darby bought a hot tub. I know that sounds a little strange. Let me explain. Darby has some health issues that make a couple of things true. She is at greater risk from COVID, so she doesn't socialize indoors except masked, and she gets cold really easily. In the beginning of the pandemic, we all stayed far away, but as time went on and we learned more about transmission, my friends often socialized outside. In the summer, it was great. We could gather in a backyard after work or in the evenings and keep some distance, and we did fine. Until the days started getting shorter. We bought a solo stove and built fires. We used blankets and hand warmers, but nothing kept Darby warm enough for very long. As we headed into fall of 2021, Darby and her partner Fur worried about the isolation of another winter. And that is when the Amazon treasure truck came through with inflatable hot tubs for under $500. They bought one and installed it on the back deck, and for the last 2 years, once a month or so in the cold part of the year, I put on my bathing suit and bathrobe and grab my towel and drive over to their house and talk to my best friend while sitting in hot water so we both stay warm. They almost always only use their hot tub at night, looking for the stars between the branches of the trees. We have been dear friends for 15 years, and we both need this time together. Sometimes we have to adapt how it happens, but it needs to happen. Going into the dark time of the year doesn't mean that everything changes. We are not grizzly bears, or turtles for that matter. We don't go off into a dark cave or bury ourselves in the mud at the bottom of a pond and lower our heart rates and respirations enough that we are effectively sleeping deeply for 6 months. But we are still animals, and it doesn't make sense to follow the same patterns year-round. We are residents of the Northern Hemisphere, right around the 45th parallel, and our light and weather patterns are very different in the summer and the winter. In fact, we get almost 7 hours less of daylight on the winter solstice than we do on the summer solstice. That means that on the longest days of the year, nearly 2/3 of our day is light, while on the shortest, it's only about 1/3. I talk a lot about life being in balance. A balance between work and rest and play, a balance between time to be alone and time with others, a balance between salads and chocolate. But light and dark are an area where life inherently has to have some balance. Humans almost never experience true darkness. Have you ever been deep in a cave? How many of you have been deep into a cave where it's completely black and dark? I remember once as a child going to the Oregon caves, and the tour guide said, okay, I'm going to turn the light off now, and there will actually be no light. This isn't something people really ever experience. There is almost always some kind of light, whether that's human-made or astronomical. And of course, we couldn't survive pure, unadulterated light. Some kind of shadow will always be present. Katie Weaver wrote an article for the New York Times that spoke of her experience in the Orfield Laboratory, an anechoic, or without echoes, chamber in Minneapolis, a place that for a while held the record as the quietest place in the world and still claims the record, despite that technically going to another sound dampening chamber built by Microsoft. Built in a former music studio, the lab is designed with a series of wedges in the walls and the ceiling and the floors. And in the case of the floor, it's covered with woven airplane cable. And those wedges absorb all of the sound. It was originally designed for product testing. So dishwashers or the Sleep Number bed could figure out how to minimize the sound that their equipment makes. But an article in the Daily Mail 10 years ago, no one could survive 45 minutes without going crazy, led to an uptick in curiosity that was, of course, then raised by social media, where there were various things saying that anyone who could last an hour or two hearing their own blood flowing would win a prize of up to $7 million if you could survive that. The prize wasn't true, nor was the challenge, but Katie Weaver did contact the owner of the lab, who told her that for $600 an hour, she could stay for 3 hours, which he thought would be a record. It was disconcerting to only hear the sounds of one's own body, though she never heard what was supposed to be the thing that drove people insane, the sound of her blood moving through her own arterial system. But she did write, inspired to flesh out my contributions to science and my employer, I determined to gather data about other normally quiet things I might do that would now be loud. You know what was loud? Massaging my scalp. Raising my eyebrows so that my frontalis muscle flexed under the skin of my forehead was too. Chomping my teeth produced a resonant sound inside my head, one that my husband would have hated if he was there, but he wasn't. So, I repeated the chomp many times to be able to describe it with perfect accuracy. Like rapping knuckles on underside of oak table to fake spirit presence during seance. The rustling of my paper as I jotted down notes was extremely loud too. But always, whenever my movement ceased, the silence of the chamber rushed back in like tide obliterating a footprint in the sand. Ms. Weaver came to understand that real silence enabled us to hear very quiet things more accurately. Or to put it another way, that reducing sensory input allowed us to hear things that we would otherwise miss. And perhaps this is the blessing of the dark as well. Like in the children's book I read today, darkness enables us to receive the gift of light in new and marvelous ways. You heard the word children. It's all good, Ari. I understand. Have you ever seen the Milky Way? Yeah. If you go outside on a clear night, outside the city lights, you are apt to see not only stars, but whole galaxies. And almost assuredly, a faint band of a paler area that extends throughout the sky. This is the Milky Way. It's the galaxy that our solar system is part of. And it appears like a line across the sky because we are actually in the middle of it. So it's like being inside a quarter and seeing the edge of the quarter from the inside. We can't see individual stars within the Milky Way with our naked eyes because there are between 100 and 400 billion of them. Simply the fact that the best guess is between 100 and 400 billion tells you that there's a lot of them and we really don't know how many there are. Children, and sometimes adults, tend to be afraid of the dark because we don't know what's out there. But it is the dark that actually enables us to get to see the beauty of the stars that's present all the time. But gets overshadowed in the light. The difference between the night sky in my house in Portland and the gorge or the beach or at Mount Hood is just astonishing. New possibilities, new worlds, new galaxies abound. Having a time of year when we see more of the dark and less of the light gives us a chance to see other things in a new way. It's no surprise that so many of our winter holidays are celebrated at least partially through light. From the candles of the menorah on Hanukkah and the Kinara of Kwanzaa, to the candles of Yule and solstice, to the lights on the Christmas trees and the lights so many of us decorate our houses with on this time of year. We see lights better when there is more darkness. And this is a joyous way to face the darkness, singing carols or decorating a tree or lighting candles or walking around your neighborhood admiring holiday displays. But if we're going to truly honor the dark, we need to actually accept the dark for what it offers beyond a chance to see lights more clearly. Reverend Kristen Harper describes a dark that calls animals to a safe hibernation, that protects the germination of seed and bulb. Darkness signals an end to the hectic chaos of our days and lulls us to sleep and revitalization so that we can face the next challenge. Without dark, the cycle of growth and harvest and fallow time doesn't continue. Without dark, new life doesn't have the chance to emerge. Without darkness, we don't rest as well. People who do shift work, defined as anyone who works outside of normal daytime hours, whether that's evening, nights, or very early mornings, seem to develop significantly more health issues, including diabetes, a greater likelihood of cardiovascular issues and strokes, and are even more likely to get cancer. While the inherent isolation associated with working different hours than most of society plays a role in this, it's also clear that people have more disturbed sleep when they're not sleeping at night, and that alone can cause health problems. Now, some people really like working different hours than 9 to 5, and clearly there are some jobs that really need people to be there around the clock. But what we can extrapolate is that people do better with regular sleep cycles, whatever your regular is, and that generally people sleep better in the dark. But besides sleeping, we all need to rest. And rest and sleeping are not entirely the same thing. Dr. Sandra Dalton-Smith writes that we need 7 different types of rest. Physical rest, which can be passive, like sleeping or napping, or active rest, stretching or yoga. But in addition, she says we need mental rest, letting ourselves slow down, relax, not perseverate over problems. She suggests that we take short breaks during the day or write down thoughts so we can let them go before bed. The third type is sensory rest, putting down the screens or the phone, step away from the computer and the active multitasking. Like the anechoic room, intentional moments of sensory deprivation can help with this. I walked in this morning, there's all of this warm, friendly kerfluffle, which was awesome, but I really was just listening to Howard playing the piano, and that was so lovely, just to... Number 4 is creative rest. Number 4 is why ministers get study leave, because anyone who has to come up with new and creative ideas needs to go look at beautiful things, nature, or works of art, so we can come back with a fresh perspective, and ministers are by far not the only people who do that or need to do that. All of us need moments of awe and wonder to be our best. 5 is emotional rest. If you're a person who, as Dr. Dalton Smith puts it, gives a reluctant yes rather than a truthful no, you may need emotional rest, which she defines as the ability to be authentic, to get over your own need for people-pleasing and to be honest about your own needs. And or the sixth, social rest, which is where you choose to spend time with your friends who feed you versus just exhaust you. Any of you have friends like that? And finally, spiritual rest, which you are doing just by showing up here, making time for something greater than yourselves, connecting in community, feeling a sense of belonging and purpose. What kind of rest do you need, friends? What does your body, your mind, your spirit need in this time of darkness and chill? How can you choose to maintain those habits and rituals that get you through life in the seasons? And what do you need to get you through this winter with rest and joy? Maybe you need to let some stuff go. Maybe you need less stuff. Maybe you need to focus on fewer activities and just pick your favorites and spend some time relaxing with a cup of hot cocoa in front of a tree. Or maybe you need an inflatable hot tub. I don't know. Whatever it is, may it be so. Blessed be, and amen.